All right, this is everything you want to know about the COVID vaccine. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID as well. My name is Dr. Valda Crowder. Folks affectionately call me Dr. V, and I'm an emergency medicine physician. I've been practicing emergency medicine now for 30 years. All of these presentations are dated so that you know when this information was provided. Things are obviously changing, and we're moving on through this. We are now closer to the end of this than we are to the beginning, which is good for everyone. The source documents for this presentation is at AskDrV.us, and then you can also follow me on Twitter, which is AskDr_V. All right, the structure of this presentation is basically, I'm going to do a presentation and followed by Q&A. The goal is really to answer your questions and really deal with real-time things that people have going on. During the presentation, everyone's in listen mode, and then you can type in your questions while the presentation is going on into either the chat icon or the Q&A icon, either. I take questions from either. All right, the intention is to keep webinar participants informed with COVID-19 science that will help you and your family stay healthy during this pandemic. The outcome is that you'll leave the webinar motivated to create or improve an action plan. It is very, very important to have a plan during this time, during times like this. And some people are creating or improving a plan for a broader community, like a homeowners association or a school or a business. This is where we are to date. Globally, there's been 124 million cases of COVID-19. There's been 2.7 million deaths around the world. The United States is about 4% of the US population, but we represent about 25% of the cases and also about 20 to 25% of the deaths. So we are disproportionately represented in the cases and also in the deaths. We've had about 29 million cases and about 539,000 deaths, which is, like I said, we're only 4% of the population, but we are about 20% of the deaths. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, why is the United States done particularly bad? Today, there was an article where Trump admitted that he listened to Fauci on how to handle the pandemic, but he actually didn't do what he said. He actually gave an interview and actually openly admitted this. And this has really cost lives. Currently, there's still some outbreaks. There's been some outbreaks at fitness centers. So I would still try to stay away from the fitness centers. There's a lot of beautiful weather outside. I really recommend people exercise outside, walk, jog, run, play tennis, play golf, whatever it may happen to be. We want to thank Kroger, Starbucks, and Target, because these are retailers in Texas where they're lifting the mask mandate that have said they're going to actually still require masks to actually to get any sort of customer service or get any service at their establishments. Similarly, we want to thank Gulf Oil for actually putting signs on their tanks that say that people should wear gloves or use a paper towel and pumping gas. Pumping gas is one of many touch points that people don't think about. Has a lot of people using it over and over and over again, and often is not wiped down. Krispy Kreme jumping into the action. They said for the month of March, they will give a free donut to anyone who's vaccinated. Come in and show your card, and you get a Krispy Kreme donut. All right, and as we said, COVID-19 deaths are about 10 times higher in countries where there is either adult or child or pediatric obesity problem. All right, so let's go through the things that are important, because we still have some people out there that are catching COVID-19 and want to know what to do. So it's highly contagious. Minimum time of exposure to infect others is about 45 seconds. About 60 to 80% of the people who actually get exposed become positive. Often they develop symptoms 7 to 10 days later. COVID-19 is both droplet and airborne. Droplets are larger, greater than 5 microns, and they fall 3 feet from the source, their source or place of origin. Airborne particles are smaller and they travel out further. So this is kind of what it looks like. The red particles are droplets, the gray particles are airborne, and then you can imagine if somebody who's COVID positive, like this gentleman here, is coughing or talking or speaking loudly, all the things that are within his pathway are going to be affected. So that could be door handles, that could be park benches, that could be a restaurant table or anything like that. PCR testing, which is the most uncomfortable test, is the gold standard. It's most accurate 8 days after exposure. The rapid test is not very accurate. 30% of the time, it tells you do not have COVID-19 when you do. So 30% of the time, that test will tell you do not have COVID-19 when you do. I've always been telling people upgrade their mask. The fabric masks are 20 to 25% effective. The surgical ones are 30 to 35% effective. You can get the KN95 mask now at Costco, at Home Depot, at Lowe's, on Amazon. They're about $2 a piece or so. Get yourself 7 and use one for each day of the week and kind of rotate them. The Spirion half mask is the one that I used when I would see patients that were COVID positive. It's an N100 mask. A lot of people complain about masks being uncomfortable. I just actually share with them, this is what we do when we intubate someone and we put them on a ventilator. It's an extremely uncomfortable procedure where we actually go and pass this tube over their vocal cords and then connect them to a ventilator. Okay, clusters of COVID-19 symptoms. The most common symptom of COVID-19 is no symptoms. So people can be healthy, look healthy, feel healthy, and still have COVID-19. You can get flu-like symptoms without a fever, flu-like symptoms with a fever. You can get symptoms that are almost like a stomach flu, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Then you also have fatigue, confusion, and then a combination of abdominal and respiratory symptoms. Patients who have clusters 4, 5, and 6 are the ones that are more likely to actually be admitted, wind up in the ICU, or die. There's also COVID toes, which is a reddish blue discoloration of the extremities. You usually see it in kids and younger people, but I've seen it all the way up to age 55. Now, I really want to talk about this outcome of what we're seeing with COVID-19, because we're going to be dealing with patients that have recovered from COVID-19 and disabilities for a while. So you have people who catch COVID, they're symptomatic or asymptomatic, they completely recover and they never develop symptoms again. Then you have patients who catch COVID, they're symptomatic or asymptomatic, they recover, but then their symptoms return. This is what we call long haulers. And there's now some Facebook groups with long haulers where they're sharing what they're doing to make a difference and what sort of symptoms they're seeing. Then you have people who catch COVID, and then 5 months or more later, they catch it again. That's a reinfection. And then we have folks that catch COVID, become seriously ill, and have what we call post-ICU syndrome. And that's when someone comes out of the ICU, and about 75% of these patients have cognitive, mental, or physical impairment. They can have limb amputations, they can have renal failure, they can have a stroke. About 50% of the young patients cannot return to work. And then some of them have scarring on their lungs and decreased lung capacity. I wanted to share this with everyone because Derrick Rose was traded to the Knicks last February, played one game, and then became COVID positive. He actually has taken him a year to actually recover from this. And he rejoined the team just as of Tuesday, today. He still is not playing. He gave a very interesting interview where he just talked about the fact that he had a brutal 1-year battle with COVID-19, and he's a young, healthy person, obviously, since he plays for the Knicks, and he's never felt like anything like that before. Then you have some folks again that have mild COVID symptoms, and then they seem to do better, and then later on the serious symptoms kick in. So, it's one of those diseases that really isn't over when it's over. Researchers have found some of the long haulers may be having their symptoms because we've been finding higher concentrations of coronavirus in the brain than in the lungs. So that's why we may be seeing some of the neurologic symptoms where people are having depression, people are having problems concentrating. Some people are losing balance, having problems with their balance and walking. All right, so if you just recently found out you're COVID-19 positive, quarantine immediately. Make sure that you have a pulse ox. I was asked today, what should I get for somebody that just recently became COVID positive? You want to make sure that they have a pulse ox. Again, that should normally be the first number. SpO2 should normally be 94, 95 or higher. Zinc and vitamin D3, everyone should be taking now. So everyone should be taking zinc and vitamin D3. You want to have a bathroom that's only accessible to yourself. And you also want to have a cell phone so you can call 911 if you need to. And have people leave anything at a closed door. You also can open up the windows and put in a better HEPA filter in your HVAC system. How do we treat COVID-19? So in addition to the oxygen and vitamin D and zinc, the other thing is famotidine, which is Hepcid AC. This is also something that is very, very important, not because you have a stomach problem, but because Hepcid AC is used to decrease inflammation. So you want to make sure that you have Hepcid AC in your cabinet. So that way, if you become COVID-19 positive, you actually can take it. Decadron and the monoclonal antibodies and ECMO, which is a form of ventilating or oxygenating the blood outside of the body, all things we're going to talk about. Now, the antibodies are really, really important. If there's one thing, if you haven't been vaccinated yet, or you intend to wait a little while, the one thing that is clearly important is to know where there is an infusion center to get antibodies. Not all hospitals have them. These antibodies actually decrease your likelihood of being hospitalized by 70%. If you're over 65, you're eligible. If you're between 12 and 64, people have different facilities have different criteria, but usually it's some sort of a combination of diabetes or kidney disease or high blood pressure, or if you just have an elevated BMI and you're a little overweight. The main thing that is important is that normally these work early on into the disease. So if someone has symptoms for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, these antibodies work very well. They will not give them to patients that have had symptoms more than 9 or 10 days. So if you're COVID positive and you're feeling some symptoms, get the antibodies quickly. As we said, the immunity can last up to 5 months afterwards. They're recommending that if you have had COVID-19 within the last 90 days, you can wait until the 90 days to 5 months period has resolved to get your COVID-19 vaccine. All right, so let's talk about the vaccine. All right, so we know the virus is inside a fatty layering with a spike protein. That spike protein actually connects to the receptor protein and unlocks, and that's what allows the virus to enter into our cells. We have over 1 trillion cells in our body, trillion with a T. So once that virus gets in there, RNA tells it to make copies, and it makes copies of the virus as well as the fatty layers and the spike protein. It reorganizes, goes out, and infects another cell. This happens over and over and over and over again. So people often with COVID-19 will come in and say their whole body feels on fire. Now, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines both work similarly. Messenger RNA is coded for the spike protein. When you get vaccinated, you produce the spike protein, just the spike protein. Your body recognizes it as foreign, develops antibodies, attacks it, and kills it, and is now ready when you see COVID-19 in the community. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a viral vector approach. It takes the common cold virus, alters it to become harmless, and it combines it with some genetic material from COVID-19. This combination then teaches the body to actually attack the COVID-19 protein so the virus cannot attach, and then COVID-19 becomes harmless. So these are just the 3 right now that we're dealing with are Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. And these are the 3 that are available in the United States. The Johnson & Johnson being 1 dose. Johnson & Johnson was also the only one that was actually tested during the UK and South African mutations. Moderna and Pfizer were not. Janssen, which is a study going on now, is just about getting 2 Johnson & Johnson shots and seeing if that increases the effectiveness at all. Novavax, I think we will see Novavax actually apply for emergency use authorization probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. That has a clinical trial that has been going on, and Howard University was one of its sites. Novavax does have manufacturing hurdles, and you may see some partnership in the pharmaceutical industries to actually get over that. People ask me often what's in the vaccine. This is what's listed on the FDA website is actually being in the vaccine for both the Pfizer and the Moderna. I haven't actually seen yet the Johnson & Johnson ingredients, but when we get them, we'll update this slide. I get a lot of questions about DNA and RNA, and can these RNA vaccines mess up my DNA? So I wanted to just show DNA and RNA are dramatically different. So DNA is 2 helix, 2 strands. RNA is 1 strand. They also have different nucleobases that are actually used. But what's important is that RNA comes from DNA. So DNA can reproduce itself, and it also produces RNA. RNA cannot produce or alter DNA in any way. The other thing that's important is that DNA is your DNA is susceptible to UV damage. RNA is not susceptible to UV damage. So what's important to know is that tanning beds and prolonged sun tanning, that does actually damage your DNA, but the COVID-19 virus does not. The COVID-19 vaccine, does not. All right, now I've got a couple people say, well, the vaccine was developed quickly. I remind people that this vaccine actually came from SARS, from the SARS vaccine. So we started working on a SARS vaccine after the SARS infection started in 2002. That impacted 810 people died across 33 countries. This is an article from 2005, and this talks about actually the viral vector approach and the messenger RNA approach back in 2005. So COVID-19 and SARS are very similar. They both have spike proteins. They both cause severe respiratory symptoms, and about 80% of the DNA is the same. So the COVID-19 vaccines are really the result of SARS research. And so it was developed over a period of about 15 years. We probably would have been in much, much more trouble if we had actually had a pandemic that was from a virus that was not related to something that we had seen before. Now, this is where all of the information in the next coming weeks is going to be really, really important. And this is what I'm actually using to determine what I do now that I'm vaccinated. So, and that is what's going to happen with all of these mutations. So in the $1.9 trillion bill was money for genomic surveillance and genomic testing. We will be hearing a lot of information over the next 1 to 2 weeks on what's going on with mutations. There are many, many, many mutations. I'm listing here 4. I have heard of at least 2 or 3 more that are not on this list. I suspect when we do the genomic surveillance, we will probably find out that there's many mutations. So the UK variant is actually 70% more effective in getting in the cells, and people are actually sicker with it. That UK variant is actually stopped by the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. The South African variant actually has a lot of variations to it. It can be more dangerous with children. It seems that Pfizer and Moderna can stop it, but not quite as effective as it is with the UK variant. The Brazil and California variants are all still being tested. In UK, they found that 64% of the people were dying that actually had the mutations and the variants. This is just the lab study showing that Pfizer and Moderna could be less effective with that South African variant. To my understanding, both companies are actually working on a booster shot. So far, we've actually given out 126 million doses of the vaccine. So we're really moving at a very, very fast clip, which is great. Part of this is some of the companies that normally are competitors coming together and working together to help actually provide manufacturing help. Some people have asked where to find the vaccine. These are two websites. The one, vaccinefinder.org, is sponsored by the CDC. The vaccinehunter.org is actually one that is a private organization, as well as putting your name on the CVS, Walgreens, Costco, Giant list, etc. Now, a lot of people ask, should I get vaccinated if I have this or that? So for weakened immune system and autoimmune conditions, the CDC says yes after consultation with your primary care physician. For Guillain-Barré syndrome and Bell's palsy, they say yes, you should get vaccinated. Now, pregnant and lactating, they actually did not do testing on pregnant or lactating women. They're currently doing testing on pregnant and lactating women. We've had our first child born with antibodies because his mother got vaccinated while pregnant. For pregnant or lactating women, the CDC recommendation is to actually consider, after consultation with your OBGYN, what would be the best for you to do. And lastly, G6PD deficiency, yes, after consultation with your primary care physician. All right, so once you get the shot, it takes about the first 10 days or so for the shot to sort of get into your system and you begin making that spike protein. You really start building immunity right around day 10 to 12. And then that immunity builds. By the time you get your second dose, you might be 60 to 70% effective. And then when you get the second dose, that actually tops it off from 60 to 70 all the way up to the 94% effectiveness. So I think it's important for people to remember that once you get the shot in your arm, you've got 2 weeks where not much has changed. In Israel, where they have actually vaccinated more than 50% of their population, now 97% of the COVID deaths are people that are unvaccinated. This is a race. We've been saying this is a race. We're all trying to get vaccinated before these variants and mutations arrive. And I think it's really, really important that this is a race. So when are you fully vaccinated? 2 weeks after your last shot. A lot of people have asked me that question. What can you do when you're fully vaccinated? You can gather indoors with other people that are fully vaccinated. So I would go over to a friend's house for a small dinner party with 4 or 5 people, with all of those folks being vaccinated. If there are unvaccinated people around, or then you still need to wear your mask and stay 6 feet apart, etc. They're saying currently now that if you actually get in contact with somebody with COVID-19 and you're vaccinated, that you do not need to quarantine. Obviously, we're all avoiding medium and large size in-person gatherings. If you're experiencing symptoms, get COVID-19 tested. You can still become positive even though you're vaccinated. The issue is that you won't get as sick. And so that is the important thing. FEMA is actually doing a funeral reimbursement program. They actually launched it in the last week or so, and they're reimbursing up to $7,000 for families that actually had to bury family members as a result of COVID-19. So, and the website is there. All righty, keep the photos coming. Keep the photos coming. Let's go to Q&A.